Only
Yeah, we have enough
Yes,
to move
you
forward.
guys are live. You guys can start.
Okay, thank you, Zach. All right, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order of the February,
This conference will now be recorded.
sorry, the cat's now moving over.
I like
The
to
February 9th.
because I can see how you all spell your names, so I don't misspell them when I start typing my meeting notes.
And we'll call the meeting to order at exactly 6:30. So tonight we only have, I shouldn't say only, we have two budget presentations. We have the public library and the DPW. We're missing a couple members, but again, we're being recorded. So if they don't, not able to join us, they'll be able to catch up with us on the recording. So that being said, we don't have any other agenda items. We'll do a few updates at the end about next steps and next meetings. But other than that, Chris, if you're ready, Brian, if you want to throw up the first budget. Full. And Chris, you direct us if there's anything else we need to pull up on screen. And other than that, you can go ahead and start.
All right. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the library's budget request. I'll start, if it's okay with you, with the level services budget.
Sure.
Okay, so you know, we have a bare bones budget. There's not a lot of wiggle room, and there's not a lot of change from last year's budget. So basically, in the library salaries, the personal services lines, we have a few contractual increases. We did a 1% increase, cost of living increase, plus some step increases, and then there's one staff member who's moving up as far as longevity. So it's not a huge increase, but we do see a slight increase of $7,914.40 in the personnel services category. And then for the most of our other expenses, we kept them the same as required. We did have a slight increase in the professional services computer line. That's the line that we use to pay our fees to our sales network, library network. So there was a slight increase in our assessment from sales, and that's reflected in a $129.47 a whopping increase in that professional services computers line. We kept the repairs and maintenance equipment at $1,000. Typically, the library spends around $1,500 to $1,600. After we use the town appropriation, we move to state aid to fulfill those requirements. And then $4,000 in office supplies. Again, we usually spend anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000, and we use up all appropriation. We turn to state aid to fulfill that. So these requests don't meet all of our requirements, but it's what we've had the last several years, and we're able to maintain at that level. And then for books and periodicals, we kept the 83,000 request from last year. With this bottom line budget of 544,766.30, we would have a requirement for state aid to spend in materials 87,000, a little over 87,000, and we make up that difference between the 83,000 request and the 87,000 with donations from our friends group and also again from state aid. Other library expenditures as programming and things like that, building needs and equipment, we pay for all of that primarily with state aid and somewhat with grants and donations. That's pretty much, that's it for the level services budget. Does anyone have any questions for me on that?
Chris, that budget with the addition of the $4,000 that you mentioned keeps you fully state aid compliant, yes?
It does, yes.
And you just received, as I understand, you just received the first installment of FY 2021's.
If we have, that's news to me. I've received notice that we will be getting it.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps better said, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but we have not actually received it yet, unless, Brian, unless you know something from Phyllis that I don't know. Okay, I don't believe that's come yet, but we are expecting it soon, and we do have a slight increase this year from last year. We typically get anywhere from 16,000 to 20,000. This year, I think we'll get 24. So we are expecting the first installment. Usually it comes in October, but we have not received it yet. Okay, well, I'll move on to the level funded budget. So essentially all we did was the increases that we had, the contractual increases that we had to staff, and then that little bit to sales. We just, removed a corresponding amount from our books and periodicals budget. The difficulty with that is, if we were to receive the same bottom line that we received this year, the 536,212, we would have a materials expenditure requirement for state aid of almost 86,000. So we would have to make that up through other means, mostly from state aid, again, somewhat from the Friends. I'm not completely sanguine about how much we will receive in state aid in FY22. And the Friends also, while the library has been closed, has not been doing any fundraising. So, those other alternate sources are not really secure in FY22. So, having to meet that materials expenditure requirement from those additional sources would be a great hardship on us. But that's really the only place that we can make that cut in order to come up with the same, with the bottom line the same as last year.
Chris, and I think I asked you this question when we met, and forgive me if I did, and I'm repeating myself, but is there any concessions made on the requirements or any lightening up of the requirements this year because of the pandemic and because of tight budgets?
This year there is, yes. So the MBLC has been very lenient as far as the number of hours that we're open. Obviously, we're close to the public now. Ordinarily, we have a certain number of hours that we have to meet each year, and they have waived that requirement last year and this year. And then also the materials expenditure requirement, while they urge us to meet the requirement, we're not required to do so. Both last year and this year. We did not meet it last year, but obviously we have not, been penalized for that. We are, as I said a moment ago, we are expecting the first installment of our state aid soon. And next year, this year we probably will come close to it, but we may not meet it entirely. But we can't guarantee that that will continue. In FY22, we fully expect, MBLC is indicating that they will expect us to meet our materials expenditure requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So do we have any questions or comments from the committee? No. And Chris, I know you had given me a couple additional documents, Kevin and I, which we certainly don't have to go over in this meeting, but the salary grid, which we've gone over the last several years, and your expense tracking worksheet, which I loved. And again, we don't necessarily have to go through that with the committee tonight unless you want to, but I can certainly just forward it out to the committee. Is there anything you'd like to talk about in this document? Because I think it's very helpful.
Yes, so this document is where I track things that we spend in addition to state aid. So you can see, in addition to town appropriation. So you can see in areas like repairs and maintenance and equipment, where I'm getting those figures when I say we spend from 1,500 to 1,600. After we use the town appropriation, we switch over to additional sources, which in that case is exclusively state aid. And I just track what we spend on each budget category, in addition to what we receive from town appropriation. And that's what you're seeing kind of in purple on that document. And if you scroll down on it, you can see the programming that we receive no funding from the town for that. Typically, we spend anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a year in programming. We get about 2,500 to 3,000 of that from Friends and from grants from various the Arts Council and things like that. But that still leaves us with $6,000 to $7,000 that we spend out of state aid every year. So that's what I'm tracking here with this sheet. It gives you a better idea of the total operating costs of the library.
And are there any, I know we'll be talking capital at some point with the committee, with the capital committee, but are there any needs of the library that you think are going to be coming up within the next year or two that we should be kind of aware of, or, so the so-and-so machine is fine this year, but it's going to die next year, or we anticipate it will need to be replaced. What are some of those items with the library that you may anticipate would be coming up soon?
Well, we've been looking toward this expansion and renovation for several years. So there are quite a few things we've been kicking down the road, anticipating that we might be rebuilding the library. The biggest one coming up is going to be the roof. The original 1896 roof, it has a tile roof, a slate tile roof that's in pretty good shape, but the addition that was put on in the 70s, not so good. So that roof leaks pretty much every time we have any kind of significant storm, and we've done some patching on it, but that will have to be replaced if we do not get the expansion. There are multiple things like that, but that's the biggest concern at this time.
Okay.
I've got Brian Kylie getting prices on the roof, and it probably will be a part of the capital plan.
Great.
So it's not going to last forever. And no matter what we do with the building going forward, that roof would be, carry over. So there'd be no reason to tear that roof off.
Can we replace it with an 1890 slate roof? That seems to be doing
You could
well.
replace it with a slate roof, but I don't think you'd like the price.
No. Wonderful. Anybody else from the committee have any questions, comments? None? Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Okay.
Just wanted to say that the stuff that the library's been doing for the kids with the activity packs and the book packs and stuff like that has been awesome. So thank you guys for figuring out a way to pull that together.
Yes, they've been very popular, and the town and Plymouth County also with CARES Act funds has helped us to be able to do that. I mean, obviously that's not something we ordinarily do. You're talking
Right.
about the Take It and Make It kits
Yeah.
that we've been doing. Those are crafts that people can reserve and then take for their children to do, and in some cases we've even had some adult ones too. That's not a normal thing, but due to COVID, we're doing the best we can to try to still serve our community.
Right. No, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, thank you very much, Chris, and Kat, I see you there as well. So if we have any questions, if any follow-up, we'll certainly reach back out to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Guys.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. Everyone. Okay, presentation's up. Good evening, John.
Good evening.
You having a good snowstorm?
When we spoke earlier this morning, I thought this event would be over at this point, but here we're managing our way through it.
Well, Laura offered you the opportunity to cancel the meeting. I think that offer's still open.
I don't offer too often.
Short and sweet.
Well, it doesn't look like it's that deep out there. Of course, I haven't gone out, so.
We're managing.
Excellent, good. Well, next time I offer, please don't hesitate. Excellent. Well, if you are ready and you want to jump ahead, go right for it.
Yeah, I thought we would. We never know what next week has in store, so
You got that right.
we're already talking about it. 3 more storms with the biggest one being next Tuesday. So as we said, let's no time like the present. So
Yeah.
again, I apologize. I missed the beginning. I'm not exactly sure the format you want to move forward with addressing. Do we want to address level services or level funded budgets first? Do we want to address simply changes? Again, the Public Works is a multifaceted budget. There's a lot to it. We have in the past spent a long time on it. So if we want to work off, included for you is the PDF presentation that we typically provide, but I think maybe you've all had an opportunity to see that.
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense to kind of do similarly how we just did and take each category, each department, if you will, and
Sure.
kind of go through level funded and then level services and then move on to the next one.
Sure. So again, we are not proposing any significant new initiatives or such this year based on the directive. Our level services is literally maintaining the level of service that we've been able to provide to the community for the last several years. It's based on primarily meeting our contractual obligations, where we're seeing some things. So if we want to start with just your general worksheet, the DPW department head, highway and tree.
Yep.
Again, those contractual obligations we've actually made with some attrition and retirements and such, that number has actually gone down slightly. The bottom line for our personnel for DPW services is actually reduced our request from last year, is down 0.92%, almost 1%. Maintaining the same level of staffing, but we do benefit when when we lose senior employees and we are able to bring in new employees. They come in at typically lower scale and step, so there's savings in that area. Again, contractually over the next few years that will rise, but right now it's actually provided an opportunity for some savings. And in that then allows us to address a few of the areas within general expenses on the level services. Excuse me 1 second. You'll see a few increases. Off-duty details is one that I've spoken numerous times to the committee about. Not only do we have to meet the department's contractual obligations, there are other departments that have contractual obligations and those rates increase, but what really is at the crux of this is the requirement for more and more we need police details on just with the volume of traffic that has increased, as well as the distracted driver situations increases more and more. We really do need that next level of safety, traffic safety on the roadway, and rely more and more on police details to provide that service. So we're looking for an increase there to move to 5,000. One of the things I will say, because I know we're trying to make an attempt to look at what our actual expenses have been versus. I do have to say that the year COVID has obviously affected our operations significantly. So some of the work that we would have anticipated or regularly done on the roadway, the second half of FY20 and the first half of FY21 really aren't representative of what would be normal operations for us. So we're trying to take some of that into consideration. So where you may see that actuals were off from what was budgeted, a lot of that was the fact that, we never went back into typical spring operations when we came out of the winter last winter, and this fall never got back to full strength on our road crew operations. So there was a surplus in those for FY 2021, but we anticipate utilizing them even more with the need to catch up on work that we haven't been able to do due to COVID. And hopefully, the second half of this year, we see the world open up again and are able to get back to whatever our new normal may be. So operationally, another area you'll see we repair and maintenance of road. We've continued to work to increase that yearly. So our FY21 budgeted was at 55,000. We're looking to increase that to 60,000. Part of the reason for that was this year we saw significant increases in material costs, aggregate costs for materials such as those had all maintained for the last 5 to 6 years, but we're seeing somewhere in the area of 15 to 20% increases on a lot of So a lot of our aggregate materials and stock, catch basins, foundry, building block, cement material itself, all the things I think you've all recognized. Not only are we seeing an increase, we're also seeing a shortage. All the same things that all the contractors you talk to are speaking about. The materials just aren't there for a number of different reasons. And when they are, we're seeing a really significant cost increase, whether it be additional charges that are applied as far as freight and delivery or service charges, things like that. So we're seeing increases in those areas, which we had for the last few years been able to our contractors were holding the line, and based on the fact that there's a shortage of material and a shortage of labor and contractors out there to do work, we're seeing prices escalate rather significantly. Another area that we are requesting an increase would be supplies of highway signs and lines. More and more we're a need to replace street signs as they age. We're replacing those. We're in a program right now to replace and continue to upgrade our signage along the roadway to the more reflective, higher visibility, bigger lettering on all our street signs. Those signs are made out of aluminum, steel, high-grade reflective 3M material, and we're seeing pretty significant cost increase just to get the stock for those. We do that work ourselves, but the stock and the labor involved in that, those prices are increasing. As I look, probably the other area would be the MS4 investigation and enforcement. Again, I've spoken about that in the past. That's a stormwater management permit that the town works under from EPA and DEP. Those requirements, the new permit enforcement actions and such are increasing requirements for monitoring, record keeping, best management practices and such as far as how we manage internally our stormwater management. That stormwater management is the flow of drainage off of yours and our properties into the street, into the storm drains, which then outflow eventually to our waterways. And so that's the MS4 in a nutshell, but it's an extremely extensive and expensive obligation that cities and towns have had to meet and will continue to meet moving forward in the future.
John, is MS4, so is that an outside service or is it us just, I don't know how to say it, is it us doing the work that meets those requirements?
A combination of, so we have engineering services that we utilize for assistance with the permit, meeting the permit compliance and public hearings and some things like that, but also it's our own force that goes out to literally out to the outfalls where the water drains out falls out of the pipes. We have to do inspections there. We're using GPS and tablet-based programs to do record keeping, monitoring. We have to monitor after 48 hours after an event. We have to go to these outfalls, look at them, see if there's any flow. We have to observe them in the summertime to see if there's any flow during dry periods, because that would lead to what would be an illicit discharge into our storm drain. Then when those situations occur, we have to trace that back, do testing. We work in coordination with the Board of Health and Conservation Commission when those issues arise. So it's quite extensive. So it's a combination of, utilizing our own in-house staff as well as professional engineering expertise.
Thank you.
I don't know if Brian has spoken to the board at all, or the committee at all about the current engineering, the solicitation for engineering services we have out at this point, looking for a comprehensive environmental management firm, engineering firm to oversee not only planning, conservation, board of health, plan review and such, but also the anticipation would be that the same firm would work with us in public works to oversee our MS4 program. So there'd be consolidation of those services as well.
Brian, I think I already asked this question of you. If and when that were to happen, would we then consolidate to one central budget for that service, or would you break it out across departments?
I would put it as in the engineering department, because some of the money that would support that would come in from the petitioners. So, you know, John, when he does a road project or a drainage project, that would be part of his budget proposal, or his proposal to do that project. The engineering fees would be incorporated into that. But in-house engineering that we would require for other purposes would have to be paid for out of an expense line, or engineering done at the request of a license or petitioner for permit would be paid for by the permit application fee. So if somebody wants to do a subdivision, we're going to estimate a cost for engineering services and charge them up front. But we'll probably have to go back and figure out, you know, a budget for engineering. And the first year that we do it, it's going to be quite a wild guess about what we'll be spending as a town.
Okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll take each section and open it up to questions. So we're not jumping around too much from one department to the next. Departments within departments. So any specific questions on DPW highway tree?
Yeah, it's Joe Conley. I have a question. So, John, you mentioned the MS4, it's very expensive, but then there's only $88 that was spent year to date on that. Is that seasonal or something?
Yes.
What's that?
That'll come at the end of the MS4 process.
Yes,
So it's like a seasonal end of the year thing?
correct. We have dates at which we have to meet the obligations of the permit. Usually like a June 30th date or a September 31st date, where we'll have a larger cost related. We actually just had to do some, it's not reflective. One of the things too, this is not reflective of the last 2 months, but we've actually, while we've had some more moderate winter weather, we've been able to get out and do some of that seasonal and, inspection. It's a nice time, actually, December, January, when we don't have snow, it actually works out really nice to be able to get out to these areas, because you're not dealing with, most of these outfalls actually are out in the woods. So you find yourself in stream beds and things like that, and it's a nice time to actually get out and be able to observe them. So we actually had to make a recent purchase for some of our software upgrades and such with the GPS units that pinpoint the location, so we can upgrade them on the map, which is a requirement. There's 440 outfalls that all have to be visited within the permit period, and a report that's done. And what's nice is now with tablets and GPS units, we can actually do real-time updates and fill out the reports on site, which means it's a labor savings, but it also gives us real-time accurate data that we can incorporate into an overall GPS system. So in the event that you had an upstream blockage, well, we know where the outfall is, and we have that mapped, and we can start to trace that right back to the catch basin that that's just all the catch basins that are associated with that outfall.
Nice. The other question I had was just like the one that says repairs and maintenance on the road. Does that include like building new roads, or is that just like patching and stuff?
That's really repairs. So that's the work we do in-house. That's patching. If we do an in-house drainage repair to existing drainage structures, really to purchase those materials as well. The work that's done, the rebuilding of roads, repaving of roads and such, those all really rely on our capital budgets and our Chapter 90 funding that we receive from the state. That's the 99.9% of the funding that we utilize for road repair and resurfacing.
How much is that for this year?
The Chapter 90 appropriation is typically, and I say typically on average for the last 5+ years, 380,000. And then the town has been matching or exceeding that for the last 7, on average 500,000. At the last special town meeting, we just allocated 350,000 from what would have been the request from last year's budget. Hopefully we'll be able to put a little bit more towards capital improvements again in the upcoming annual town meeting. And we'll also utilize, one of the other things we do is we utilize water enterprise accounts for when we redo water main and upgrade water service and things like that. We incorporate the cost of restoration of the roadway into that, and that cost is offset by that project as well. So it really gives us an opportunity to extend those dollars as far as possible.
Nice. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this section? No, perfect. All right, moving along. Oh, our favorite topic.
Appropriate
Go
tonight.
time.
In speaking with Dan and Crystal, when we did a pre-FinCom presentation meeting, we discussed whether or not we wanted to, the wishes of the committee as to whether or not we wanted to present the level service budget, real request for the snow and ice operations, which on average, as we've talked about, runs around $400,000 to $425,000 a year. So we went with that $425,000, recognizing that, it was unlikely that in one year we'd make such a significant jump, but still felt it was important to put that number in there as a figure place, with that request of identifying what's our true level service costs. I think that's a number that probably will be variable, perhaps again in discussions with Brian, until all the other budget requests come in, and we can hopefully continue to work on the plan that we'd identified last year of annually or biannually being able to adjust that incrementally to be reflective of the actual, a more truer cost.
Mhm. Agreed. So for the purposes of that, we can just kind of leave it for now, knowing it's got a big asterisk next to it.
Absolutely. No, I kind of had to calm Brian down too when he initially saw that number and thought I was coming in for that request. I said, no, we fully acknowledge, but we appreciate that, it now is being acknowledged that we do need to make it a more accurate representation of the true costs.
Very good.
You want to do street lighting, or do you want me to turn the page?
Well, just anything to mention really significant on streetlights?
Well, we did sign a deal. We didn't have to purchase the light fixtures from Engrid. They actually agreed to retain ownership and change all the light bulbs to the LED. And you could see that the savings is pretty darn good. So we're hoping that number will come in even lower as we go, but we'll see. So.
Are we still in plan of, we're still in replacement mode of some of those?
Still replacing. They haven't finished completely, but they're getting close. The quicker they do it, then of course they slowed down because of COVID. I don't know if they really did or didn't, but everybody says that. So we didn't realize as much savings as fast as I had originally hoped, because they didn't change every fixture to LED as quickly. So we may see more savings in the second 6 months than in the first 6 months.
Speaking with the representative from National Grid, we think they're at about 80% completion of the streetlights they own.
Well, they changed one on my street and it is bright, let me tell you.
Agreed.
I keep thinking there's a car coming down the street. That's how bright it is. So it works.
And those
Excellent.
are
All right.
Those are the equivalent of the 40-watt bulb. The 90 watts that were available would have really been bright.
Yeah, a bit much maybe. Wonderful. All right, we're on to fleet maintenance.
Again, recognizing the request for level services, we're maintaining that, meeting the contractual obligations in there for that are set out in the collective bargaining agreement, and recognizing the aging fleet that we have and the increased demands on that. You'll remember, I think last year I came with a request of $100,000 to bring it up to actual, and realizing the limitations this year, I'm looking at increase that by $5,000 to $65,000 for repair and maintenance on our equipment. Just the last week makes us kind of reflect on the fleet in itself and public works, and our average age of our large dump trucks is approaching 15.8 years old. That's the average age of a frontline snow fighter unit. So, and I think, as all of us know from our own vehicles, the cost of repair and maintenance only increases every time you go to the dealer. Well, we face this. Thankfully, we save hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't think that's an exaggeration, in the fact that our in-house staff of 2, and then we supplement that with a highway and grounds employee for the winter. Those 3 guys save an incredible amount of dollars and time for the town as a whole, because those 3 mechanics also maintain the police, fire, and council on aging, as well as other random vehicles the town may own. So in totality, it's more than 100 vehicles that are maintained and repaired. It's more than just general maintenance. Last week we had 5 sander trucks down at 5 of our 7 sanders down at the end of the week. Thankfully, the weather cooperated with us on Thursday and Friday, and they were able to put some time in over the weekend and get us back up to 4 of those 5 back on the road. We still have 1 out, but the work they do, particularly on times like these, is Herculean.
And John, I assume it may be more of an accounting issue, but again, to Joe's earlier question, on that line item 0, my copy says $0 spent as of December. Is that, Brian, do you know if that's more probably just an accounting?
Just probably a timing issue, but I don't know.
Yeah, that, I didn't look at that number. That, I think, is perhaps inaccurate. I would like to actually see what that number is.
Yeah. My gut tells me it's probably just an accounting issue, but yeah. All
Well,
right.
what's interesting actually is, if you notice the maintenance of buildings and grounds, shows an expense of $24,577. And that, I think, so if you look, actually, as I look at it quickly now, I apologize, I didn't catch that earlier. That may be being credited from the wrong account.
Yeah, because
Yeah, it says last year we
there's an article
made
for
$119.
Yeah.
there's an article for 30 grand in last year's town meeting for town hall maintenance, and my suspicion is that we probably put it in the wrong account, but I will check that in the morning.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions for fleet maintenance? No? Perfect. All right. Next.
All right, let me just scroll down here. Sorry, not paying attention. Disposal.
This should be a quick one.
So the disposal area actually, although it's under Public Works, is, there's no items associated to it. And the one that is the professional engineering services is actually managed by the Board of Health. It's to do with the closeout costs and maintaining that from when it was an active landfill for the town of East Bridgewater. So these are just expenses related to maintaining the engineering permit requirements for the closure of a landfill.
Brian, is this something we could similarly do that we did last year? I don't even remember what it was with sewer, where we shifted from Board of Health to DPW. Is this something we should consider shifting?
I only got 2 more years to go with this, so I would say that it's not worth the aggravation.
Right.
And I think this ends in, John, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is over in 2 or maybe 3 years, and it's all over.
I believe you're correct with that. That'll be I think there's a 30-year closure or monitoring or something like that.
Right. I do know that the Board of Health said that they have to replace the fence around the property. That's one of the things that's on the tick list from the EPA. But we're going to be using some of that property for a fire department training facility and a gun range for the police. So I figured I'll throw it all into that project when we do it. And,
As well as that site still remains our recycling center.
right.
In the last year has seen its activity there increase significantly. We've gone from an average traffic trip per day of approximately 100 to upwards of almost 200 vehicles per day utilizing the recycling center when it's open on the first and third Saturdays. So we've seen a significant increase there. That service being used.
Any questions on that line item? No, perfect. All right, moving on to water.
Water department, again, we look at the water department and George, and we always refer to that as sort of an off budget because it's an enterprise account. It's not funded by general government. It's funded entirely through the ratepayers and their consumption of water. Offset all the costs related to operations, not only operations, but also that includes the debt service and indirect costs related to operating the water department. In personnel services, we do have a retirement. A 32-year employee will be retiring, and there's an obligation to her this year to meet her
Accrued payable benefits.
Thank you. Spoken with Brian, and we felt it was important to put it in here as a level services, but we may utilize, as we have in the past years, a one-time buyout, an article for one time to address retirees within town. That way it doesn't go into your operating budget for perpetuity. That's worked out well, I think, in the past for us, I know. But again, felt it was important to include.
Well, I
it.
wanted it in somebody's budget, so I didn't forget it.
But
I won't
with
let
an
you.
asterisk to note that it may get pulled out.
Correct.
Okay. Can you speak to the increase, and I don't want to interrupt you, but can you speak to the increase of the department head salary?
Yes. These are contractual obligations. My contract was renegotiated last year. And there's a 2% anticipated increase for the water superintendent. Let me see. With my, with my individual contract, we renegotiated some salary increases, but other benefits were reduced we reduced vacation, eliminated longevity, stipends, things like that. So that's, you'll see some offset costs throughout the budget in that area.
Thank you.
Into that, I think what catches people sometimes, the members of the committee that have been on for a while will remember, but we actually carry myself, the operations manager, and the water superintendent are all funded, portions of our salaries are all funded from across the different divisions. So rather, in some capacity or another, how we look at the time allotted to each division, 50% of my salary is funded from the highway and grounds budget. 35%, 37.5% is covered from water, and 12.5% from solid waste. It depends, if you break up your 8-hour day, or in my case today, it's going to be a 16-hour day, but it's a proportion of the day. It's how we sort of assign that salary item across the different divisions.
Okay, you want to jump down to expenses, and unless there are any other questions in salary, we can jump down to expenses, okay?
Again, an area you'll increase off-duty details, same explanation as with highway and grounds. The work our distribution crews are doing out on the road, it's a necessity. It requires more traffic safety, traffic control. Our wells, you'll see an increase in our wells, a request. That's just the systems, the wells continue to age, require more and more maintenance every year in order to meet the consumption demands of our system. There's a request for an increase for the repair and maintenance for roads. When we refer to that, that's the restoration of the roads after we've done work on the infrastructure to repair water main leaks, service leaks, hydrant replacement, valve replacements, the work we're actually physically doing in the road. This is funding for that restoration work that goes on, and that's to purchase aggregate materials, gravel, processed gravel, asphalt, contractor work when we bring in a crew, an outside vendor to do infrared patching. We'll do that a lot a year or two afterwards. That allows the trench to settle, and then we'll bring in a hot infrared machine which reheats that surface and brings the patch to grade, and it's a permanent patch. So again, that's the request, increase request there. Professional services for testing and laboratory, we're requesting an increase, significant. It's a 33% increase there, up to $40,000. It's the additional DEP, EPA permit requirements to stay in compliance. We do regular testing of our water system, both at the wells and the treatment plants, as well as 15 locations throughout the community. And we have to do that twice a month. So that's 30 samples that are taken from residential and commercial businesses throughout the water distribution system. Monthly, those costs continue to escalate. The testing that has to be done, lead and copper, iron, manganese, all the things that we're testing for, contaminants, potential contaminants, we need to make sure, and those requirements continue to be added to. Seems monthly. The state and federal government wants more information and testing on public water supply. Which I'll just get on my soapbox of the, our public water supply in every community in Massachusetts. I'll speak for. Our public water supply is far safer than the water that you purchase out of your Poland Springs bottles. Tested on, as I alluded to, on a very regular basis, whereas the FDA only tests 2% of the water that's packaged and bottled. So my plug for you utilizing your public resource.
And recycling is costing more, so drink out of your tap.
Recycling costs a fortune. Other areas of increase. There's a request for a slight increase in the chemicals, which we have to use in order to treat our water. Primarily, it's a chlorine, a sodium hypochloride, which we use to treat the water and sequester any chemicals and such at the treatment plant. We're seeing escalating costs there, as well as consumption's increasing, obviously, particularly in the COVID world with more families at home. We're seeing significantly higher consumption rates. So we need to provide, additional treatment to match the consumption.
Well, I'd like to point out, and before I open up to any questions, that although you've gone over all the increases in detail, I want to point out that there are a substantial amount of decreases in this budget as well. So I think I just want to kind of call that out. So I know that in speaking with Dan a little bit, that, you guys have really been taking a good hard look at actual spend. And I just want to point that out, John, that thank you, that, this is, I think, a very, very good representative budget of, what your department's actually starting to look like. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We over the last several years, we've tried to make an effort to actually fund the line items appropriately and to come to you, and be able to show you where our true needs are and have the budgets be representative of actual expenses. It's better on our end, and I think it provides a better view for not only yourself and the committee, but the community to be able to look at the budgets and,
Yep. I agree.
I agree with that, John. I just want to say, I've been working with you for 3 years on this, and you continue to evolve it and improve it and make it as accurate as possible. And it is much appreciated.
Thank you. And I appreciate your feedback. It's very helpful to get that. No,
Usually I save my little thing for the end. So wait a minute, I interrupted. All right, so now we'll open it up. Any questions for John on water?
So I have a couple of questions, John. So electricity, do you not use any electricity down there with the water pumps?
We use a substantial amount of electricity. We're actually the second largest consumer of electricity in the town. You'll notice that actually, if you go to the next page, is an indirect expense. Because possibly 3 years now, electricity was removed from our budget and is captured as part of the solar program, which I will not even begin to try to explain. It's very complicated, but in order to take full advantage of all the credits the town receives, we needed to have a power match, I guess would be the best way to describe it, an equalization of the usage. So those dollars was segregated, I think, from all the large users' budgets and actually consolidated into one electricity budget for the town, which Phyllis manages. But you'll notice when you look farther down under indirect costs, you'll see that an indirect cost to the department is electricity. FY19 actuals are 173,000. FY20 actuals are 146,000. We still, though, even though it's no longer in our budget, are trying to take full advantage of energy saving opportunities. One of the things we've done was put variable speed motors on our pumps. And that has allowed for us to throttle back, per se, the
Nice.
energy consumption that's required. And we're still continue to look at ways, working with Brian Kiley to we're actually looking right now at some behind the meter options. So where we could look at solar opportunities on the existing plants themselves, capture that power and use that to offset before it ever gets into the system.
Right. Sounds good. And then what's the banking service fees? Is that has to do with bonding or something?
Correct.
$1,000 a month for bank.
That has to do, as I understand it, and I don't claim to be an expert on this. Melissa, probably, I see she's on. She may be able to explain that better, or Brian, but the way I understand that, that's to do with the fees related to the cost of our project bonding, which
Okay, that makes sense, right?
in excess of $1 million a year. So I think it's the banking fees related to servicing those bonds.
Right, makes sense. Okay, great. And then I guess I don't know. Phone seems kind of high. I mean, that's 12,000 a month. That's like $40 a line. You get 24 lines.
Phone is high. Phone actually is really no longer an appropriate description. It's just the line item that all of the that it all falls under, but that's where we have all of our data lines, and our Public Works is moving towards a much more mobile platform. So we utilize a lot of data lines. We also have multiple communication lines that go in and out of the treatment plants and to each well site. We have 2 treatment plants. We have 6 well sites. Those all talk back to the tank and to the Public Works operations. And then we have numerous mobile tablets. Foremen and our water treatment offices, operators all have mobile tablets where they can actually respond immediately to alarms and system failures. They can monitor them all virtually from their tablets through a VPN, a secure VPN that eliminates downtime in the system.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
Good stuff.
it's a continually growing expense, but the efficiencies are well worth it.
Yeah, better service. Awesome, thank you.
Can I move on? Next page.
So next page, as we started to allude to, that's indirect expenses, which are offset that the town occurs and then are billed back against to the enterprise account.
I'm sorry, I skipped you a little further ahead. I can go backwards if you'd like me to.
It's entirely up to the committee.
We've done relatively good on the indirect expenses. So, but I can go backwards if you'd prefer.
The only thing I guess I would bring the committee's attention to would be several years ago, we came to the town with a request to fund a system upgrades line item with a initiative, a project to replace all of the water meters internally within our system. And we're doing that with our own resources. We anticipated it to be a 5-year project and requested an increase of that line item to $300,000 annually to fund that. We are nearing the completion of that. We actually would have completed that had it not been for COVID and the inability to access residents' homes and send our people in to residents' homes. We've had to halt that program. But of the 4,400 meters, we have 400 water meters remaining to be replaced. So we're proposing a $100,000 reduction in that line item this year. So that will bring the request of the appropriation from 300,000 down to 200,000 moving forward, which allows more dollars to go back into our retained earnings and to be utilized for future capital improvements and capital projects, hopefully.
And I don't think we need to probably go through the debt service. That's fine, so we can skip over. Okay, we're on other.
Other is actually kind of hangs out there. That's a throwback back to the days of before DPW. Those light items go back to 2005 and previous. Some reason or other they were never consolidated or unable to be consolidated into. So one is a tree planting account. It's funded at $5,000, just in an effort to try to replant some of the public shade trees that we remove annually. Care of the Common is a line item that has stayed the same since 1988, but is my understanding that it was in 1988, the town received a state grant to restore the town green, town common, to its current condition. And part of that agreement was that the town would forever maintain a care and maintenance of the common account. We funded it $3,000. It pays for irrigation upgrades, fertilization, any kind of miscellaneous expense related to caring for the common. And the other line item that is there is the care of public grounds. We're not requesting any increase there. Last year we had increased it, and we will continue to, but again, recognizing level service, we tried to meet that request, and I think we can continue to do what we did last year on our athletic grounds and our open spaces and other recreational areas with the current allocation. We have seen and I think everyone's experiencing it, a significant increase in the usage of public spaces and some of the demand that puts on it. But thankfully, the years that we've put into building the facilities and the quality of the turf and such, it's really allowing us to keep it at the level that we feel meets the threshold that we've established for it.
And John, is that that doesn't include school grounds, does it?
Correct. There's a separate line item that I can identify into the facilities. Now, I won't say that never the two shall mix, but we try to keep a very accurate recording of what is spent on school grounds for Chapter 70 allocations and things like that, so that the dollars that are expended there can be tracked accurately.
Thank you. Any questions on those 3 line items? Beautiful. Okay.
Facilities maintenance, facilities management, it's headed by, I've been remiss, I should identify the individuals who are the division heads for each of these. Brian Kiley is our facilities manager. He would typically be here, but he's in a plow truck right now. So, as well as Rob Ken, our operations manager, highway and grounds, and Jason Trepanier is our water superintendent. I think what you'll observe again in that department head salary. Now that department head salary that's the one individual that is fully funded. That only represents Brian's salary, and I'll bring attention to that because we have, in discussions with Brian and others, have recognized that that classification we need to look at addressing the salary grade for that, and we will be doing that with the wage and personnel committee at the time. But that is typically I like to reflect on the position, but with this one, I think I'll really reflect on the person that is serving in that position and how he has the role he's filled for the town. Years ago, I said, that a facilities manager will save the town 10 times in value, and I think Brian probably saves a town 100 times in value, but nothing has been more evident than as we've dealt with this COVID-19 response. I don't think it's beyond to say that the role he played in assisting the schools to be, open to the extent that they have, and municipal buildings and things like that. He's continues to go above and beyond.
He knocked himself out for us and always does, and saves the town. All the energy savings projects that he's brought forward, that's all been Brian. And he's more than, you look at, does the man who maintains our facilities pay for himself? And my recommendation here was he pays for himself and probably 3 others. So he does a hell of a job. And he's always looking for ways to do it better for less money. And other than the fact that my ceiling still leaks, he's doing a hell of a job.
Brian, do we allocate part of his salary to any school line items? Or
We put it on the Form 1, which is the cost of how much does it cost us to run our school system. So he doesn't get billed directly to the school department, but he gets accounted for in the per pupil spending.
So there'll be further discussion, I'm sure, on that.
Good.
John, when we met, I think you did also a survey of other positions of this kind in the immediate area, and backed into how you justified into this, correct?
Correct. I didn't know if that was something we wanted to bring up here, or what we'll discuss when we meet with wage and personnel, the justification for where we are. So a place to negotiate from is what I feel is a fit.
Right.
But that's the only significant increase with personnel services. Facilities management, general expenses is another area we've been working at over the years. When we first started this, now in 2012, was a shot in the dark as to what our numbers needed to be. And every year since then, we try to tweak those again to make those numbers more accurate and appropriate to where the true expenditures are. So you'll continue to see some shifts, some movement from place to place. More reductions. The significant area you'll see are building projects. There's a large increase on building projects. Building projects are projects that don't either get identified in time for capital to be considered in the capital improvement plan, or don't really fall into the realm of a capital improvement. They're replacing a carpet in an office space, or repainting an office space, or fixing the ceiling tiles in Brian's office, or lighting projects, things like that. More and more other departments are recognizing the necessity of things that come up. An employee needs a office space redesigned or something like that. This is the area, this building projects is where those projects are being funded from. So that's the area request, that large request there. Again, tried to look at some other areas within the expense line item where we could reduce those areas to help offset the cost of increasing the project, the building project line item. But there is an overall general expense increase. And those are the expenses on the town side, as I alluded to earlier. Then although it's all under the facilities budget, we break out the school facilities budget as well. Not only for Chapter 90 purposes and school accounting, but also our own internally, so we can track those expenses as well. The one area, there's 2 areas there that we've identified and continue to try to support, both with reallocation of dollars within the expenses, but also asking for additional resources, revenue from the town. Heating, oil and gas has continually been underfunded. And we work to increase that line item so it's appropriate and actual for the school buildings. And the same would be the building projects, same explanation, just on the school side, the unforeseen needs that don't meet capital
John,
requirements.
I know for FY22, this won't necessarily play, but would it be safe to assume that we'd be seeing some savings this year, this current year, and like that heating oil and gas line item, given that the schools are not open, as much, definitely not open nights and weekends the way they have been over this past year?
We had hoped that, but that will be almost the opposite. It'll be exactly the schools are being kept in occupied mode all the time to try and continually move air through for air replacement. So at no point have we been able to put the buildings in unoccupied like we typically would, which has energy savings. So to meet the demands of air movement and continually moving fresh air through the buildings, we've had to use the systems, maximize their ability. And also, as far as heating, to meet the DESE requirements, the Department of Public School Education, I think is with that. You'll notice that most of the schools have windows open. And those windows stay open, 50% of the windows in each classroom are open. So that is a constant demand on the heating system. The efficiencies we'd hope to gain with the boiler replacement and such at the central school probably will not be realized this year. I think this year, last year should look at as kind of outliers for those costs.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any questions for John on the facilities department budget? Yeah. All right. Oh, that was the last page.
Yep, it was.
Awesome.
It was, but we're missing two.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not to belabor the conversation. The sewer division, as well as the solid waste.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can dig that up.
They are included in the PDF, but if Brian can bring them up.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Let me move backwards then. Let's skip this. Solid waste and recycling. Did I have given you a spreadsheet, or is it just on the slideshows?
It's not included on the slides that I see. I don't know if the committee has those pages or not.
I don't think we did. I think I missed them too.
It is if you scroll back up, I don't know if you have the PowerPoint presentation.
I do have the PowerPoint, and I apologize. There we go. Solid waste. Here's solid waste and recycling. Is that visible enough? Can I bring it up a little more?
There you go.
Solid waste and recycling, we are entering the last year of our 3-year contract. So these are somewhat speculative numbers that we're anticipating. You'll see our level service budget brings the total cost for solid waste and recycling this year over $1 million. But we are actually hoping that this will be the first year in numerous years that the program is revenue positive, and we generate a small profit to offset some of the costs. We've seen a significant increase in enrollment over the last year. We're up now over 2,800 accounts which was what I originally projected 3 years ago when we started this. So but we are seeing additional increases in tonnage. And the cost related to that is solid waste tonnage is increasing. Recycling tonnage seems to be stabilizing. We aren't seeing the massive percentage increases that we did see, but we're still well over $100 per ton to process recycling materials. And we'll be approaching over $90 a ton to dispose of solid waste. So those numbers will have to be reviewed next year when we move forward. And we'll be entering into negotiations again with a hauler for collection and costs. Those are primarily predicated on one of the driving forces on that is the prevailing wage rates, because that's a prevailing wage position for those contracted services. And when I requested those last week, just to try to get an idea of where we are, we're seeing the prevailing wage rate for a driver collector for our area go from $31 to $41 per hour. It's a 33% increase, I think it was, we figured out. And those are fixed. That's fixed by the state. That's not a number that any contractor has control over. That's a fixed number. That's a hard number that any contractor is going to have to look at for our area. So what I had hoped was going to, be able to say was starting to find some footing. I'm a little less confident in that. The solid waste is just an ongoing moving target. So it's an obligation that towns have taken on, but it comes at a massive cost. However we try to do it, whether it be a general government obligation or a residential obligation or individual obligation, it's very, very expensive to get rid of, residential waste, commercial waste, whatever it be.
And I have to assume that, again, with COVID and folks being home, that's probably a large driver of your increase.
Correct.
In recent months. So we need people to go back to work so they can throw the trash away at work.
Well, to be honest, that's it. When COVID struck, the commercial industrial tonnage fell by 70%, and residential collection on the municipal side went up by about 40%. So all that, evidently there was some private trash going into these commercial dumpsters from your houses.
Yeah, great.
And sadly, a residential collection program is far more labor intensive than a commercial system where, when you're at your office or whatnot, there's a large dumpster that the custodial staff takes that all to and dumps, and one truck comes and picks that up in one action. In East Bridgewater, you're collecting it, one individual truck is collecting at, 3,000 plus homes driving around town. So the cost to provide that service is significantly more than the cost for a commercial or institutional facility to the collection contractor, the disposal company.
Great. All right, any questions for John on solid waste and recycling? Remember his mantra, when in doubt, throw it out. So I say that all the time.
Use the yellow bin, not the blue one.
Yeah. My mother, you got my mother hooked on recycling, and I have to say, nope, throw it out.
Well, we've spent the last 30 years on that.
Yeah, well, undo a lot of that training. All right, last budget was, remind me.
The sewer division, just a new division to DPW. We took that operation over from the Board of Health last year on operating that internally. no significant changes. The one area we're looking at where we is a professional services laboratory testing. We are anticipating just in the last month, actually 2 months, we've seen an increase in the commercial interest on the Route 18 corridor. Which is what we had hoped for. This is exactly the situation where we said we build it, they will come. Well, it took a few years longer than we had hoped, but just in the last literally 2 months, we've seen two applicants approach the town. One of them has already gone through the full process. The other will be within, I would expect the next 30 to 60 days. And so that is going to start to bring significantly more regular flow into the sewer treatment plant, which was one of the things we were looking at, hoping to develop out of this, as well as, that all bringing future economic development to that area, and maintain what's there, sustainability, but also to see growth on that corridor. And I feel quite confident now that we're going to start to see that area develop and move forward in the next few years. So we're anticipating that there'll be more demand on our wastewater system in the next year or two, and we may we'll see this division grow, which will be an additional request for allocation, but hopefully offset with usage fees and connection fees into the system, as well as the benefits of the economic growth and the general tax base. So it'll be a net positive for the town.
Curious, what is the plant utilization presently?
So the plant's capability right now can treat 30,000 gallons a day. Currently connected to the plant is the high school, central school effluent, and the fire station, as well as the CVS. So we're right now processing about 6,000 gallons a day. So there's significant
20%.
capacity there.
So it's running at 20% capacity right now.
Correct.
Nice. So there's plenty of room to grow. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for John on sewer? No? Great. Geez, I feel like we flew through that, John.
I usually set aside a whole evening.
Why do we do? It's one for long now. Well, again, I want to reiterate, I think this was probably, to Dan's point, we've been kind of, I personally have been working on it with you for at least 3 years now. And I feel like this is really a great, solid, I don't want to say first stab at it, but first good pass at a budget. I appreciate it. A lot of good information. I feel like we're getting a little more knowledgeable ourselves about it. Have to refresh every once in a while, but I think this was a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you. 20 years, I'm finally starting to get my arms around it.
I didn't want to say that, no. So any other questions for John in general? Comments, questions?
Doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Really
All right.
sounds corny. It truly is. It's a team effort. I can be here tonight because I don't have to worry, because I know I've got great people out there on the streets taking care of it.
And you were perfectly happy to say, oh, no, I have a meeting to go to. Excellent. All right. Well, we'll let you get back out to your rest of your day, unfortunately, into your night. But thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
And so we only have a couple of quick other updates to go over. I wanted to update everybody on kind of the rest of our schedule. And so we had an email today from the superintendent kind of giving us an update on their schedule for their budget process. And unfortunately, I think with everything going on with COVID, they're a little behind the eight ball with their schedule. Typically, by the time we see them around February vacation, they've already gone through their process of their public forum and their school committee certification process, and that isn't going to be the case this year. So tonight they actually met, their budget subcommittee met, I believe before the school committee meeting tonight, to vote to move forward with their budget. They're not planning on doing their public hearing until March 4th, and then their school committee vote until March 9th. So therefore, they want to be able to meet with us. The earliest would be March 10th or 11th. This is 3 weeks behind, later than we typically see them, or when we had planned on seeing them, which was February 22nd. I won't lie, I'm concerned about the time frame. We have a deadline of the end of the month of March for us to have everything complete, so Brian can then work on closing the warrant and doing all that work. So I am worried about it, but I think there's been some communications that have gone around today with the liaisons in the school. And I think, I think this is now keep the lines of communications open. I think we'll have a sense of where they are with their budget. I think Dan, you're probably going to stop in there tomorrow. I think it said, take a peek at it. And there shouldn't be any material changes from what I'm hearing. And if that's the case, then we'll kind of have a placeholder plug that we can plug into. Again, my concern is us not having a public presentation with them until March 10th or 11th. If something materially changes, that's going to really kind of put some serious pressure and potentially crisis on our time frame. But I think given, again, the fact that, we're having these good communication lines open, I think we can probably go ahead and say, and go ahead and reschedule their committee presentation. And then really just try to stay on top of this as we can. So we don't have any, we don't have a crisis at the end, in the 11th hour. That's my concern.
I just want to say real quick too, and Dan and Crystal, you can, this is my understanding, just for the committee's knowledge, is that they're not behind on their budget or where they stand in their budget process. It's getting it out to the public and getting it to the school committee meetings, because the school committee meetings and the public focus right now has been on getting the kids back in school. So it hasn't shifted to the budget. That's my understanding. So I just wanted to make it clear that it's not that they've neglected their budget or are behind in that area.
Yeah, I completely concur with Melanie. And I think when we had our review with the superintendent and the business administrator, that they had put a lot of thought into their budget. I think they did a really great job. And I think I said this in a previous meeting or two ago, that they did a great job really crunching their numbers and seeing where they needed an expense. And I'd say in my time on the committee, it's one of the most thoughtful budgets put forward in the time that I've been on the committee. So I'm hopeful, and Superintendent Legault even said to us during the meeting that, and John Shea, that they kind of thought they were there. There might be some small tweaks, but they didn't anticipate anything that was going to go crazy. So I echo what you said. I think they're just focused on getting the kids back in school right now.
Okay. So I think, between the communication we had today with the liaisons, I think it sounds like we've got a good plan. I would just ask that everybody kind of stay as super on top and communication as much as we can, so we don't have an 11th hour issue or surprise. And then I would be willing to go ahead and reschedule the budget presentation. So my question to the committee is, I don't know if we've got a preference, the 2 nights available. I don't want to wait and do it the week after. So March 10th or 11th, it's a Wednesday or a Thursday night. I should ask Kevin, because I've been
Right.
really
You
giving
know
Kevin
that.
the short end of the straw lately. So I should ask Kevin which night you would prefer. Wednesday or Thursday of that one. Yeah,
Oh, let's go Wednesday. How about that?
Wednesday, okay. I'm gonna, as long as it works for the majority, but
I
I'll go
will
ahead.
tell you, I have a virtual employee recognition night that night, so I can't attend on Wednesday.
Oh,
Well, let's go Thursday then.
oh,
Sorry.
Kevin,
There
I'll
you
let
go.
you choose eventually.
I got you.
All right.
All right, so I will go ahead and make those changes and we'll communicate with the superintendent. And then we'll just stay in really good communications around that. So therefore, we initially were talking in our schedule, we had a meeting scheduled for next week to kind of do miscellaneous loose budgets. And then the week after that was going to be school. I'm going to make, I didn't even ask Brian this, but I'm going to make the recommendation because Brian and myself have a lot of work to do to get, well, it's more Brian. And then I'll review it to get a lot of the big spreadsheet done and to get that work done. So I think I would like to make the recommendation, unless anybody feels strongly about it, that we maybe not meet next week. Take next week for Brian and I to kind of get the spreadsheet in a more final state, have a first stab at the cover spreadsheet with all of our estimated numbers to kind of see where we are. And then maybe the week after that, where we would have been meeting with the school, maybe look at that week for maybe doing all the miscellaneous small budgets that we need to kind of review. And we'll have the spreadsheet in its entirety done. We should have it done at that point. Brian, what do you think? Are you okay with that plan?
I am.
Okay. Anybody?
We're getting closer every day. I whittle away at it, but I gotta really, Monday's a holiday, and I think that's what I'm gonna be spending my time to finish it. I need to do it and not get interrupted and concentrate.
Yeah. And then we can go over, we can spend, an hour going through all the miscellaneous little budgets the week after. Does that sound okay with everybody? Yep. Okay. Then we'll do that. So no meeting next week. And then I may have to look at the week. I think we had talked about it on a Monday, but we can adjust if need be. We can obviously still do it on Monday as well. That's no problem. And then we can pick up any loose ends and loose pieces that we may have missed along the way. And then I think by that meeting, we'll have been able to get you guys, PDF of the big picture all together. And also maybe take next week, if there's anybody we need to go back to with any questions, or we may want to wait and take a peek at the whole picture before we do that. But communicate to me if there is anything outstanding that we need to go back to anybody about in your mind. And we can certainly have those conversations as well. All right. Any other questions, comments, commentary, anything? No? Excellent. Wonderful. Well, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, I'll take
Okay.
a
Second.
Was that Crystal that seconded?
She beat me.
I don't know. Was it-
Priorities, I don't know.
I'm just going to put down Joe motion, Crystal second. Whatever. All right. Any discussion? Now, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting